There's a strange kind of loneliness in the modern world. The kind you don't feel immediately, but slowly, like a dim light fading over time. It doesn't hurt all at once. It drains, quietly, invisibly, and maybe you befelt it too, that dull ache that appears after another night, scrolling through people, telling you how to improve, how to attract, how to manifest, how to be confident, how to love yourself, how to vibrate higher, how to become the best version of you. Yet somehow, after consuming all of it, you feel worse. Not better, not healed, not stronger, just emptier. It's almost ironic, isn't it, that the age most obsessed with self-love is also the age most saturated in self, that the generation taught to glow up, level up, and fix your energy is also the generation drowning in anxiety, comparison, and quiet despair. But maybe the problem was never you. Maybe the problem is that self-love stopped being a feeling and became a product. Somewhere along the way, the world sold you a story that loving yourself meant constantly improving, constantly optimizing, constantly chasing an ideal version of you that always seemed just far enough to keep you running. You were told self-love was a routine, a ritual, a lifestyle, a checklist of things you must do to deserve peace. Buy this, wear that, eat this, try that, fix this, change that, become someone new, and then you will finally be allowed to rest. But rest never comes, because the moment you get close, the finish line moves, and you blame yourself for never arriving. Maybe you've had that moment standing in the mirror, staring at your face, your body, your life, wondering why no matter what you try, you still feel like something is missing. Why the affirmations don't land. Why the routines don't stick. Why the love yourself posts feel like lies. Why healing feels like pressure. Why self-love feels like failure. But deep down, if you're honest, you already know why. Because the version of self-love you were taught was never meant to heal you. It was meant to keep you wanting change, wanting transformation, wanting to upgrade yourself in ways that require constant consumption. Books, courses, creams, aesthetics, mindsets, quotes, influencers, spiritual hacks, emotional band-aids, disguised as enlightenment. They told you what to feel, but never taught you how to feel. They told you what to want, but never asked what you actually needed. They told you to choose yourself, but only in ways that kept you dependent on their advice, their content, their guidance, their approval. And somewhere in that noise, the real you disappeared quietly, slowly, politely, like someone stepping back to let the world pass. Maybe that's why you feel empty? Because real self-love isn't loud. It isn't shiny. It isn't glamorous. It isn't something you buy. It isn't something you perform. It isn't another project for you to manage. Real self-love is the opposite of what you were taught. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about learning how to finally come back to yourself. But the truth is hard to face. Most people don't want real self. They want the illusion. The version that makes them feel like they're re-improving while keeping them distracted from the real work, the real wounds, the real silence underneath everything they avoid. Because real self-love is uncomfortable. It forces you to face parts of yourself you've spent years trying to outrun. It's messy. It's slow. It's unmarketable. No influencer can sell you that. No brand can package it. No wellness routine can replace it. And maybe you've been feeling this for a long time but didn't. Do you have the words for it? That subtle awareness that the more you chase loving yourself, the more you lose yourself. Because the world didn't teach you how to appreciate who you are. It taught you how to fix who you are. It taught you that peace must be earned, that you must become extraordinary to deserve ordinary kindness. And if you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where affection came with performance, where praise came with pressure, where your worthiness depended on who you were, not how you felt, then the self-love industry didn't create your wound, it exploited it. You learned early that love had to be proven. So when the world said, love yourself, your brain translated it into, perform better. And you tried. God, you tried. You tried every method, every mindset, every routine that promised you freedom. Yet every promise left you with the same quiet ache, the feeling that something was still wrong with you. But nothing was ever wrong with you. You were simply conditioned to believe that love is something you earn rather than something you return to. And this is where the story begins to shift. Because if you listen closely, beneath all the noise, There is a quieter truth, a truth you've been too overwhelmed to notice. You don't need to improve to deserve love. You don't need to upgrade to deserve peace. You don't need to transform to feel whole. You don't need to chase anything. You only need to remember who you were before the world convinced you that you were inadequate. That person still exists. Hidden, silent, waiting. And when you finally turn inward, not to fix, not to judge, not to correct, but simply to listen, something soft begins to return to you. Not confidence, not power, not perfection, but presence. And presence is the beginning of real set. And maybe this is the part you've avoided the most. The moment where everything you've been taught about becoming better collapses in your hands, leaving you face to face with the truth you weren't prepared to handle. Because beneath the surface of every self-love ritual, every affirmation, every morning routine, every attempt to build discipline, there's a quiet fear you rarely admit. The fear that if you stop improving, you'll stop being worthy. The fear that the real you isn't enough for the world. The fear that, without constant effort, everything will fall apart, your relationships, your identity, your sense of value. But the question no one asks is this: who taught you to fear yourself? Who planted the seed that you are a project to be managed? Who convinced you that love must be earned through transformation? Who told you that your natural state is something you should be ashamed of? Because people aren't born with self-hatred. They learn Italiano slowly, quietly, through tiny emotional fractures that accumulate over time. Parent who loved only when you performed. A culture that praised only when you excelled. A society that profits only when you feel incomplete. And maybe that's the emptiness that keeps echoing in your life. The realization that you've spent years trying to fix a version of yourself that was never broken. Trying to perfect a self you never stopped to understand. Trying to buy your way into a peace that has never lived in external things. Sometimes the most painful moment in adulthood is when you finally understand that the love you've been chasing was simply the love you were denied. And every product, every supplement, every book, every program promising transformation was just an adult version of the same emotional hunger you learned as a child. You weren't taught to love yourself. You were taught to earn the right to be loved. And the self-love industry didn't heal that wound. It monetized it. It took your longing and called it empowerment. It took your fear and called it motivation. It took your insecurity and called it potential. And instead of asking you to come home to yourself, it asked you to reinvent yourself again and again, as if your worth depends on constant No wonder you're tired. No wonder you feel empty. No wonder reberi. Self-care routine feels like another obligation. No wonder rest feels like failure. You never learned how to simply exist. You learned only how to perform. That's why silence scares you. That's why stillness feels wrong. That's why slowing down feels dangerous. Because in the quiet, without all the noise, without the constant pressure to upgrade yourself, the truth rises. The truth that you don't know how to be with yourself without judging who you are. And this is where the real work begins. Not the work you can post online. Not the work anyone can praise. Not the work you can monetize or share or romanticize. But the personal, private work that no one sees. The work of unlearning the idea that love is conditional. Unlearning the belief that value must be proven. Unlearning the habit of treating yourself like a project instead of a person. Unlearning the lie that wholeness is something you achieve rather than something you uncover. Because if you listen carefully, there's something truthfully heartbreaking about the way you've been living. You've been trying to heal with the same mindset that hurt you. You've been trying to love yourself with tools built from insecurity. You've been trying to find peace by doing more instead of being more. And that's why nothing has worked. Because real self-love is not found in the future version of you. It's found in the you that exists right now. Messy, confused, tired, imperfect, uncertain. The you that has been waiting for years to be acknowledged without conditions. And maybe this is the moment you finally understand that self-love was never supposed to be glamorous. It was supposed to be honest, compassionate, grounded, quiet, something entirely yours, not something taught by influencers or sold by brands. Self-love was supposed to be the moment you look at yourself and say, even if I never become anything more than who I am right now, I still deserve gentleness. But gentleness is hard when you've spent a lifetime being harsh with yourself. Compassion feels foreign when your inner voice was built on criticism. Acceptance feels wrong when you've been trained to chase perfection. And yet, this is exactly where the transformation begins. Not with changing yourself, but with stopping the fight against who you already are. Let me tell you something that might feel strange at first. You don't need to be better. You need to be more you, not the curated version. Not the optimized version, not the socially acceptable version, the real one. The one you abandoned while trying to meet the world's expectations. And here is the quiet truth the industry never wants you to hear. A person who truly loves themselves is harder to manipulate, harder to shame, harder to sell to, harder to control. A person who truly loves themselves doesn't need to reinvent who they are every month. They don't need constant external validation. They don't need to perform worthiness like a job. They don't need to stay in cycles of fixing themselves. They simply live, they breathe, they rest, they feel, they exist. And that is enough. Maybe that's the revolution. No one talks about the rebellion of choosing yourself without buying anything. The quiet power of saying, I don't need to transform to be worthy. The radical act of treating yourself with softness in a world that profits from your self-doubt. Self-love was never meant to be a brand. It was meant to be a return. A return to the parts of you the world taught you to abandon. A return to the truth that your value was never conditional. A return to the simple, unmarketable reality that you were always enough. And maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of something new for you. Not another journey of improvement, but a homecoming. Because the deepest form of self-love is not becoming more. It's becoming whole. And wholeness begins when you stop searching for yourself in places that benefit from keeping you lost.